Back on Inside Tennessee, we're focused on a primary race. There are lots of others on the August 1st ballot. Susan?
Monica, I want to ask you, some of your advertising flyers and so forth have talked about making Tennessee constitutional again. What does that mean? Why are we not constitutional? And just explain that if you would.
There's a lot of areas. For instance, Second Amendment in Tennessee. I'm not going to quote it because I'll get it wrong, but it says that citizens have the right to bear arms, but the legislator has the authority to regulate the wearing of arms for you'll know it as safety. And so that violates, in my opinion, and many people's opinion, our United States Constitution. Okay. And so that's in direct conflict. In fact, we have several laws on the books right now that are in conflict with each other. Like we have a law right now that says it's unlawful to carry a firearm with the intent to go armed, which basically means that it's loaded. Yet we have concealed carry permits. So we need to get those more in line with the Constitution, and so I believe that we need to make a constitutional amendment to remove that second part of that sentence there.
We are a permitless carry state, though, now, the legislature.
We are. It's just that, in reality, on the books, we have a law that says if you do carry with the intent to go armed, you're breaking the law.
Do you know how that was used and why that remains?
Well,
because it's under the age of 21, you're not permitted to open carry. And that's what prosecutors use that law for, is you're intending to go armed. And they only prosecute, in my experience now, individuals under the age of 21 that are not permitted currently because of their age.
It actually was put on the books originally right after the Civil War.
I know.
Because they were trying to keep black people from having arms.
I'm
and it's
well
been
aware
on
of the
there
history.
that long,
I understand.
so
I'm telling you how it's used.
But you think it should go away?
I do.
Okay. You think there should be any restrictions on firearms? Any at all?
Any restrictions? Give me
a convicted felon, a domestic abuser,
of course,
a mentally ill person.
Well, when you go through due process, a convicted felon,
okay.
of course, you lose your right. If you're going to commit felons, you lose your right to bear
I just want to make
arms.
sure, because there are some members of your party that think otherwise.
No, and as far as someone mentally ill, I just dealt with someone really mentally ill, trying to get that person some help. He was becoming really dangerous. Now, I didn't know if he had a firearm or not, but I knew he had a room full of knives. When someone is mentally ill and shouldn't have access to a firearm, y'all, they shouldn't be on the street. And so we have to make sure, though, that someone goes through due process if we're going to actually confiscate their property. And getting back to your question also, we use something in Tennessee where law enforcement can confiscate people's property if they have an idea that they obtained that property illegally, which is a direct violation of our Constitution. I was talking to a 25-year retired law enforcement who was telling me that, yes, Monica, there is a conflict with our Constitution, but it's just that Knox County law enforcement, we have a really high bar before we confiscate people's property, but then people have to prove that they got their property legally. So there are just many things that do not line up with our Constitution. To me, the Constitution is the safest way to protect Tennessee. Just
real quickly, a follow-up on one issue that's going to be back in the legislature this year is on vouchers. I know you're for any kind of voucher, right? And Becky, where were you on? How did you vote?
Well, I have voted against it in the past, not really against it, but I just felt like that our primary funding, our responsibility is to fund our public schools. But in the last number of years, we put a lot of additional money into our public schools. We're raising the teacher salaries. We have got a better formula that is understandable now. And it is kind of a money follows the person. So as I watched it, I've talked to a lot of my constituents, and it's kind of almost a 50-50. I mean, there's, it depends on who you talk to and who feels more strongly about it. I felt like that the Senate version of the bill this year was the best version, right. And I did sign on as a co-sponsor because I always believe that if you're working with people, you can make more effect to it than if not. But I'm still have been an avid supporter of our public schools. They need some guardrails and things that we've had to vote on that you never would have dreamed we'd had to vote on. But I still think that the majority of our kids are going to be in public schools, and we've got to support them. But there are probably your middle income families are the ones that would benefit the most from school choice. And that's not just going to a private school. It could be going from Claiborne County to Knox County, or going from a public school in one county to another. It can be going to a charter school or going to a homeschool. So I mean, there's variations of it, but I'm for making sure our kids get the best education they can get, and I will always support that.
We've talked about a lot of hot button issues. I want to ask you a very simple question, and maybe you've already addressed it. I don't know. What is the single most important thing the Tennessee legislature needs to work on come January? Becky, I'll start with you.
Well, it's simple. We're only constitutionally required to pass the budget.
That's right.
So,
but you all usually wait till April to do that, so you've got 3 months to fool around.
They start working on it in August.
Yeah.
So it really is longer. Susan knows the process because she used to be involved in it when she was in the administration years ago. But I think we've got to make sure we continue to be physically sound. Our revenue had gone up.
We're still lean, right?
Well, our revenue had, especially with a lot of the federal money coming down, had gone up to about a 12% increase a year. And we are leveled out around 4 or 5% this year. And the norm had been 3 to 5% normally. So it was a little bit leaner year this year. I think in my conversations with Deputy Governor / Commissioner Ely, we feel like it's going to be a little bit better year this year. So we'll continue to work on that because there's a lot of needs, and you have to look at the return on the investment of all our investments at the state level.
Only about a minute left. Monica, your thoughts on John's question?
Well, as I've been knocking on doors, the number one issue, when I just ask people what is the number one issue on your mind, it's the border, which that's a hard thing for a state legislator
kind of far away from us.
It is, but
I think it's the Alabama border,
But we
John.
do have to
Well, we should keep
figure
Alabamans
out
out.
what's the best way as a state that we can help people feel safe in Tennessee. The number two issue, when I say, okay, I know you worry about the border, but what is the next most important issue to you? Literally 90% say what's happening to our kids in schools. So we have got to come together and create some legislation with teeth that get all of the sexually explicit content out of our schools. The legislator passed a bill that did that, but then it didn't have any teeth to it, meaning there's nothing to happen when a school violates that piece of legislation. So that is top priority on everyone's mind, and it will be the top of my priority list.
We are going to leave the discussion there for now. We wish both of you luck in the primary and appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us be here.
We're back on Inside Tennessee with a final talk around before a break for some time. Susan?
We keep threatening one. We're actually going to have.